Again, my name's David Hirsch. From our conversations, I know that the memories shared by my fellow co-worship associates today are potentially more harrowing, more interesting spiritually. My story is one of being home. This is the congregation in which I was raised. I first started with this congregation when it first started, when I was about 2, and just as Stephanie was being born. We first met at the Lutheran Campus Ministry, which later became the Ecumenical Religious Center. You're going to hear all about all of this stuff next week, so I don't want to, give that too much away. But for me, it's my story. It's my story, is the history of this congregation. So it moved to the campus ministry on Garfield. It was a lot smaller congregation, a lot smaller building than the current Ecumenical Religious Center. There were lots of teachers that were members. Sunday school at that time was just mostly playing with blocks, and from what I understand, the blocks were actually kind of expensive, and they were provided by the Larson family, so you may not be surprised that Brian Larson was very into us playing with high-quality blocks as children, making beautiful architectural things. The adults, of course, I wasn't part of this part of it, but the adults met and talked in another room. Eventually, we moved out to the Washington Town Hall. I don't remember any of this stuff yet, so this is before my memories. Some of my first memories were from when we met at the King's Daughters Hall. In fact, we have some lovely, I think they're lovely, they're kind of look like little sparkly turds, but some Christmas ornaments, Christmas tree ornaments that we made in the basement of the King's Daughters Hall. And so we hang them every year on the back of the tree. The only way you can see them is if you're standing outside looking through the window. So, but they're very important to me, and they're beautiful, beautiful, I tell you. The other early memories I have of this congregation were sleepovers at the youth camp. I mean, we still have our retreats at Beaver Creek. I think this is probably before it was called Beaver Creek, but that's the same place. And there's obstacle courses. I remember very strongly running the obstacle courses. There's even like a kind of a zip line. That's all gone now, sadly. But the place is still there, and we still meet there for our retreats. And I remember strongly the sleeping in the cabins. It was always, I think, freezing cold, as it is for our retreats now. And then walking chillily, is that I don't know. Not sure that's a real adverb. Chillily across the frozen ground to get to the main cabin there and have pancakes and stuff in the morning. So really strong memories of that. So my spiritual journey is, I was always a UU. I was always here, a so-called cradle UU. Now, as a lot of teenagers do, I kind of fell away from the congregation in my middle years there. In fact, Tracy and I were members of the Richmond, Virginia UU congregation, and then also we went to First Unitarian in Middleton, which is that beautiful Flankroyd Wright building. We didn't go a lot, but once we had kids, we, like my parents, wanted to participate in a church community, and so we started back. And then we moved back here in 2013. And so this was coming home in so many different ways for me, moving back to Eau Claire, coming home to be near family, coming home to be near this congregation, and what a great opportunity for me in my work to be, I delivered babies at Sacred Heart where I was born. In fact, in the same exact room that I was born, which had become in the meantime, since it was a delivery room in 1968, they never redecorated it, the same green, hospital green tiles. It became a cesarean section operating room. And so on my 50th birthday, at about the same time I was born, I delivered a baby by cesarean section in that same room. And so many ways to be coming home, but this congregation is such a part of it. What is home, right? Home is a physical location. It's the town or city that you're from, or a place that you've come to identify with. It's maybe a particular building, the house that you grew up in, or the house that you now call your place of residence. That's your home. It's a place where it's a sort of a less physical but more like traditional space. So the places in our lives where we learned and we participate in our traditions is another definition of home. And it's where you share your joys and sorrows, as we just did. But mostly I feel like home is people. It's your biological family, it's your chosen family, and it's all of you is my family and is my home. And so here I am back at home. And I have to give you a quote from the musical In the Heights. I kind of feel like I'm required to be the musical person here. So In the Heights is a Lin-Manuel Miranda musical from 2008. It was written. There's a recent movie of it that was actually the first movie that we saw after the pandemic ended. We went to the theater and saw it, and I was like shrieking in joy or in tears the entire time. So if you can see this movie, and it's out there on like Apple TV, and it's on all the streaming services, but it features one of the more recent Broadway casts of it. But Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights is a story of an immigrant from Dominican Republic. His name is Usnavi, U-S-N-A-V-I, named after a ship that was passing by, and his parents saw that. So that's a beautiful name, Usnavi. But anyway, he's running a bodega, the family bodega, in Washington Heights in northern Manhattan. And so I don't want to give too much away about the story, although I guess I'm going to spoil the ending. All of his life, he's wanted to go back to the Dominican Republic. That's been his family's goal for him. He's always wanted to go back home, right? Back home to the Dominican Republic. And his neighborhood matriarch, his abuela, passes away and wins the lottery ticket at the same time, giving him enough money to travel back. But I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try to do his little rap at the end. I'm sorry, and this may be one of next year at Sorrels. I may be Joys and Sorrels. I may be presenting this one, but I'm gonna try it. So the finale of the song is "I'm Home," and it's incredibly beautiful. Now, his home should be theoretically Dominican Republic. He's going to go back to the beaches of the Dominican Republic. But he realizes at the very end of the musical that, in fact, his home is the street corner in Washington Heights and the people that he loves there. And so I'm going to try it. Abuela, I'm sorry, but I ain't going back because I'm telling your story. And I can't say goodbye to you smiling. I found my island. I've been on it this whole time. I'm home. It's a wonderful life that I've known. Merry Christmas, you old building and loan. I'm home. Abuela, that ain't a stoop, that's your throne. Long after your birds have all flown, I'm home. Where the coffee's nonstop and I drop this hip hop, in my mom and pop shop, I'm home. Where people come, people go, let me show all of these people what I know. There's no place like home. And let me set the record straight. I'm stepping to Vanessa. I'm getting a second date. I'm home. Where it's 100 in the shade, but with patience and faith, we remain unafraid. I'm home. You hear the music in the street? Take the train to the top of the world. I'm there. I'm home. Thank you.
I am Craig, one of your worship associates. As I've thought about how I was invited to Unitarian Universalism, I've lived in some different places and had somewhat of a varied spiritual journey, but the first thing that I guess really comes to mind for me is that I've always felt a spiritual yearning in my life, and faith communities are something that I've often, not always, but often sought to be a part of in order to fulfill that yearning. There's something inside that wants to better understand how I'm connected to the universe, what my role in life is, and how I'm connected to other people. This has brought me to different homes at different points in my life. But as I've gone along, I've found myself increasingly drawn to traditions that allow space for me to seek my own questions and answers when it comes to matters of faith. Faith played a very important role in my life during my formative years. As I think many of you know, I grew up in the South. I grew up in a United Methodist church down there, and that particular Methodist church could probably be characterized more by what it was not than by what it was. There were a lot of churches in that community that were really focused on saving souls, so to speak. My church was not so much focused on that. I do recall talking to a lot of friends who could name the day and place when and where they were saved, but that wasn't as much of an emphasis of the church of my youth. My church was more focused on staying humble when professing beliefs and practicing servanthood in our relations with others. My church, that Methodist church I grew up in, did have prescribed beliefs, but it also, at the same time, encouraged some independent thinking that helped me realize that the world is too big and diverse to be minimized to one way of thinking or believing. I think these perspectives have shaped a lot of how I ended up living my life and impacted the choices I made and ultimately influenced how I came to this congregation today. One of the first opportunities I had to truly go down my own spiritual pathway was in college. I attended Earlham College. That's a Quaker school in Richmond, Indiana. I didn't have any exposure to Quakerism prior to attending Earlham, but my dad thought it would be a really good fit for me. So I looked into it, and it turns out he was right about that. I was really struck by a number of things about this new environment I found myself in. I learned about the Society of Friends' emphasis on equity and social justice, on consensus, on simplicity, and when it came to matters of faith, the absence of hierarchy and dogma. In this environment, it felt like students and faculty were on a more equal playing field, and a diversity of belief or even lack of belief was welcomed. Each person, each point of view was seen as an intrinsic part of the community, and this openness that I saw, that I observed, this joining together of perspectives was very appealing to me, and one that I continued to seek out in later periods of my life. In the years between attending college and becoming a member here, there have been times I've been more involved in faith communities and times I've been less involved. But a spiritual yearning has always been there. My wife and I lived in Minnesota for about 10 years before coming here. We belonged to a Methodist church in Minneapolis as well there during that time. This period of time in Minnesota was a time of grave challenges for me and for us, but also a time of tremendous personal growth. When we decided to move to this area to maintain closer family connections and a kinship with the state that for many reasons felt a little more like home, we ended up laying low for a little while in terms of involvement in a spiritual community. But it was my interaction with a couple of colleagues who attended here that exposed me to Unitarian Universalism. I had some previous experiences, and one exposure to UU prior to this. In the Twin Cities, related to my wife's work, we had attended a service there once, and between that experience and talking to my work colleagues that attended here, we decided to give this congregation a try. And what immediately made an impression on me was the openness I felt in this community. It's a place that takes matters of spirituality seriously, but it's also a place that can be home to people who are following diverse spiritual pathways or no spiritual pathway. Ultimately, here at UUC, we're committed to staying open to one another, and it works. Being here actually reminds me of the openness and community I first felt when I went to Earlham, that college in Indiana I mentioned. And it provides an opportunity to learn about many traditions I don't know much about or want to learn more about. That kind of interfaith or intertradition communication, dialogue, and relationship building is something I'm very interested in, and something I hope to take advantage of more so while I'm here. You know, we live in a time where forces outside of us are trying to divide us or to make us adhere to some narrow set of beliefs, but I know that the diversity we see out there in all its forms is what makes the world beautiful. I think this congregation understands that, and fundamentally that's what drew me here. Part of that idea is that everyone counts and everyone matters. It's been really meaningful to work with others in this congregation to live out that creed to help the community around us in various ways. It also reinforces something I've concluded in my own spiritual journey, which is that regardless of what I specifically believe, carrying out actions in concert with others helps to build a more peaceful world is how I can make faith real and relevant in my own life.
As a few of us were preparing this service, the theme being invitation and what all brought us to UC. I'm probably going to shorten a little bit of what I was going to say today, but I don't want to diminish the reason how I found the UU. as I was thinking about invitation, I was thinking about my friend Roxanne from home, Roxy. She invites me to her Halloween party every year. I've never gone. Being 4 hours away from your hometown can be tough. Lodging, money, travel, and then you throw in COVID. And in 2020, my partner Ryan and I were moving into a new home. My work had tripled in business because people needed trailer hitches and bike racks to, if they weren't going to shelter in place, at least they could shelter closer to home instead of taking those long trips. Work was stressful. Life was stressful. And on top of that, monthly weekend visits with my mom were gone, off the table. And my real social interactions were starting to fall away. My volunteer opportunities were drying up. My bowling league was canceled. I was actually at state bowling when the lockdown started. So then I started thinking about that time and what was putting me in a tough spot. And obviously COVID was a stressor, but then I got to thinking about that time where we had all of our digital devices so close to us, that whole time waiting for that Snapchat, waiting for that Facebook message, or a phone call from a friend, just to keep that connection. But in the process, we saw so much domestically in our own country happening. I was struck thinking about the anguish of watching the George Floyd protests, the report of over 4,000 missing Indigenous persons, the increasingly hateful anti-transgender movement, and then the January 6th Capitol attack. In absence of normalcy, the worst of our politics had consumed so many, challenged our respect for each other and society. Science was being questioned. Government expectations and roles were being criticized, and our social networks were being fractured. I was losing connection. And then COVID found us. I could not taste meat for 8 months. Experienced some of the breathing trouble that some experienced. The only relief, pushing my chest into my mattress. And I would experience long haul fatigue that would take me down a couple times a week. All that, I was beginning to feel so isolated. Exhausted from work, overwhelmed at home, unable to travel, not having those opportunities. Obviously, you've seen me tear up in the sanctuary a few times. But the day that I got that first vaccine, I just was overcome with emotion. It meant a new hope that maybe, obviously, with my own health concerns, I could get better, but the world would be turning into something else. The next day, I called the travel agent and booked my mom's dream trip to Hawaii. In 2022, I turned 40. It seemed like 20, 21, 22, all were 1 year. And what was my new normal? There I was, seeking community, affirmation of my values, and then in walked you. I saw an advertisement on social media for the new New to UU class on November 5th of that year. Mildred, Karen, and Kathy were leading the class that day. I found myself on the membership committee by the end of the month. By December, I was chalice lighting, and soon I became a worship associate and joined the worship committee. And this year, in 2024, I was enthusiastically nominated and elected to the board. It has brought me more joy than I ever anticipated or expected. An acceptance of a simple invitation got me hooked. And it has been an honor to share in fellowship and service with all of you. Why was Unitarian Universalism a new spiritual home for me? I'd attended and hosted different community events, but never had truly worshiped in this space. I prepped for my critics immediately. How would my Christian and non-theist friends and family view my joining a church in general? And based on their own faith or own worldview, not diminish what I was exploring. Would I be strong enough in my convictions to say, yeah, I'm okay with questioning the idea of original sin? And no, I don't believe that anyone is beyond redemption. What were my values and where did they come from? Through my participation in actually a class here, Build Your Own Theology, I was able to map out my human experience from being born a holy child through my Catholic upbringing and being a proud Eagle Scout who strives to always live by that Scout law. Putting together beliefs that have always brought me God's love, the common good, respect of humans' personhood and dignity of their works, and the pursuit of peace. The UU has allowed me the freedom to fully participate in the pursuit of living those beliefs without the burden of the virtues that are too often subjective. I have been so proud to dwell within the 7 principles with you all. We respect all living things. We fight and serve for a more just, equitable, and peaceful community. We accept and encourage each other's spiritual growth and strongly participate in the democratic process inside and outside of these walls, knowing that we are part of an interdependent web of all existence. In the first part of your hymnal, I don't know if anyone's ever read the preface, but you'll find words like the roots and wings of our faith. And I got to thinking about that too as we continue to move into a new era of our UU. So this is where I conclude here. As both a board member and a member of congregation, I want to thank all of you for the gifts that you've just bestowed upon me since joining. Having the opportunity to coordinate our services with a variety of sources has allowed me to rediscover my love of reading and share diverse voices together. And we are also overwhelmed with so many talents in this congregation. The programming that has been offered by UU has allowed me to explore my personal strengths, supported me in my mental and physical health, and given me the opportunity to share my joy of public speaking and my enthusiasm to be a servant leader. In turn, my thank you gift to all of you in this congregation is my commitment. I forever want to present that invitation back to you, to keep our spiritual home fulfilling in the present and prepared to share the blooms of our values in the future. As we look forward to further or returning members finding our invitation, I will also be looking forward to Roxy's invitation again this year.